Welcome to the All the Answers podcast. My name is Matt Easton. This is the podcast where we try and get you all the answers. We're going to talk about collections here in a second, and I don't mean debt collections. I'm going to talk about the thing that people collect, right? Some people collect watches, some people collect cars. If you're smart, you should value your collection of friends. It's something I value. The people in your orbit will add more value to your life than just about anybody else. And if you were going to have a collection, of course, you'd want some billionaires, maybe an astronaut or two, professional athlete, musician. I'm going to let you borrow some of my new friends in my orbit. These are the exact type of people that you want in your life, even if you're not doing stuff where you're in trouble, because these are some of the most skillful people on the planet. I've got the two best criminal defense attorneys on planet EARTH. I've got Guy Fronstin. I've got Marc. Nurik is on the Zoom. We're going to attempt to get you all the answers in what they've learned in the courtroom, what they've learned in their careers on how to avoid messing yourself up. And this isn't, I'm not talking about with the cops, although they've probably got some great stories. I'm not talking about SEC violations. I'm talking about in your life, in your career. You guys have sat in those rooms where literally everything is on the line.
That's right.
People's freedom, their career, their reputation.
Their marriages.
Their marriages, right?
Yeah.
Their money. Yeah. Everything is on the line when somebody's dealing with you from the business side. I'm not necessarily interested in the law per se. I'm interested in what you've learned in how people communicate when those stakes are at the highest. Guy, thank you so much for being here. Marc from LA, the satellites have got you beaming into the podcast. It's so glad to have you. I'm so glad to have you here. Let's see if we can get them all the answers right now. First question that I have is, you see people all the time that do things that probably make you guys cringe, whether it's in your office or in the courtroom. Do you guys have any examples of things that people say or do that kind of immediately hurt their position without them even realizing? And I have a feeling you probably meet some people that think they're smarter than everybody else. How does somebody kind of hurt their position?
That's absolutely right. They do think they're smarter. A lot of times in, for example, a white-collar crime, where it's a business crime, they've been telling people that they've been alleged to have ripped off this story, this made-up story over and over and over. It gets to a point where they actually believe it themselves at some point. So then they sometimes come into our office and they tell us the same story. Sometimes I think they're not really lying because they actually believe what they're saying is true.
They could probably even pass a lie detector test.
Right. You're right. They probably could pass a polygraph exam. But when we start showing them the evidence and we call them on it, they start to realize, okay, there are some flaws in my beliefs, and we've got to get real fast, or else it's going to go sideways, and it doesn't help their case at all. So eventually the clients will become honest with us. Marc, will you say something?
There's a fine line between confidence and overconfidence.
Mm-hmm.
And since, most of my clients are captains of industry or people who are very successful, they immediately assume, like you said, they're smarter than anybody else in the room. But more importantly, they are overconfident in what they know and how they can proceed. And a lot of times you see this with politicians, people who think they can get away with a lot because they think they're above it all because they're more powerful. So it's a misunderstanding of your own abilities, a misunderstanding of your power, and a misunderstanding of what people will accept and won't accept. So you have to have a realistic assessment of yourself to begin with. Got to know who you really are and not BS yourself.
And often it's our job, Marc, to actually call them, excuse my language, on their shit.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
They may be pulling the wool over a lot of people's eyes, but when they come in our office and they're looking at losing their freedom, we've got to call them on it. We have to get them real.
Let's talk about that, because I'm not a politician. The audience out there, hi, if you're watching All the Answers, I've got Guy Fronstin, Marc Nurik here. They're the best criminal defense attorneys on the planet. He just talked about calling people on their shit. What's a skillful way to do that? Because we deal with that. All of us have to deal with that, whether it's an ex or a soon-to-be ex, whether it's a family member with a friend. Like, how do you guys skillfully get somebody to just cut the BS and start being honest? How do you do that?
Well, I have a way I do it. I'm sure Mark does too. Mine is pretty simple. I basically explain that I'm only as good as the information they give me. And if they give me false or misleading information and I build my defense based on that wrong information, then it's only going to hurt them. It's going to backfire on them, and things are not going to go well. And I give them examples of other cases where I had someone, lie to me or misrepresent something to me, and they doubled down on it. They swore it to be true, and based on that, I would move forward with my case. And then the prosecutor would say, "Hey, I have evidence to show, it's just simply not true what your client's telling you." And I say, "Look, the prosecutor's not going to get mad at me. They know I'm honorable and truthful. They're going to realize my client not only lied to these victims, but now they're also lying to their lawyer." So I kind of explain to them how it really backfires on them if they're not honest with me. So I don't know if Mark has a different approach to it.
Mark, you deal with people that they've got millions and millions of dollars a lot of times. Everything on the surface looks successful and great. How do you have that reckoning moment with that client to get them to save themselves by starting to be honest, Mark?
Well, I believe it all comes down to applying the laws of human nature. Doing what we do, what Guy and I've been doing this for 50 years, you develop a pretty good, what I call bullshitometer. And you start to understand how people can weave all these layers of deceit even upon themselves. So the first thing I like to do is when somebody has told me something that just doesn't make sense, even though they firmly believe it, and I know I'd like to just say you're full of shit, but that's not going to work. You can't confront someone. It's even this rule applies even in negotiations, any kind of business negotiation. Just don't simply tell them they're wrong, because they're going to get their back against the wall,
Defend their position even more.
Yeah.
Exactly. But what I like to do sometimes is to say, you know what, I hear what you're saying. Let me reframe it. And I want you to listen to it as though you're me, or for that matter, you're sitting on a jury and hearing me say this. And then I reframe it in a way to take it such that he starts to listen. I say, does that really make sense? Are you really going to believe that? Is that something that you can accept? For example, in a business negotiation, is that something you can accept? Would you accept it on the other side? And if they're intellectually honest at all, they'll start to break down slowly. And you keep doing it, and you keep doing it, and you keep doing it, to the point that maybe, more reasonable people will say, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it doesn't sound that great. Maybe I should change it around. And you got to say, look, bullshit is bullshit. You can't change it around. But I like to go back and forth and switch roles. I think switching roles is very important, whether it's in the courtroom, whether it's dealing with a client, whether it's negotiating with the government, or whether it's negotiating in business.
And I think that it could even, the advice you just gave, Mark, could even apply in our personal lives too. Like if it's a crazy conversation with a loved one, get them to kind of restate it from like your perspective of, does this even sound sane? Because I think people a lot of times don't even realize how insane they sound.
You're right.
Right.
But
The idea is not to lose patience and not to lose your temper, and to always try to give that other person the modicum of respect. And of course, the higher they are on the food chain, the more they expect a certain degree of respect.
Yeah.
So if you just say, look, you're full of shit, I don't believe you, that's a dumb idea, I don't think they're going to accept. Their mind's going to close.
Right.
Yeah.
I do think that respect is important in any type of relationship or interaction. You don't want them to feel attacked. You want them to feel that this is a safe place. So when you talk in the criminal context like we do, there's also a trust factor. Now, most people call us when they either are under investigation or they've been arrested, and they either know us from reading about us on cases, so they call us, or they get referred by their big, corporate lawyer who they trust to us, but they've never met us. So at first, they may try to, not be fully transparent and honest, and they have to build it. So that's a whole nother variable. The trust is very important that we develop with our clients over time to where they realize, okay, this is a safe place. And again, this could apply in any relationship, a business interaction, or a personal relationship, where you have to, feel comfortable with the person, that you're comfortable enough to open up to them and say, okay, here's the truth. Here's what really happened.
And then start building from the truth, because to your point, you build this whole case around nonsense, it's going to end up poorly for everybody.
Correct. Yeah.
Have either of you, as the best criminal attorneys out there, because this is something I run into, and that when I'm working with people on their sales and in their careers, I see people doing all the time. And the weird thing is, I don't think they notice that they're doing it. But if you guys, and I'm sure you have, ever seen people get themselves into a worse situation by keeping talking.
Right.
Just keep talking, and all of a sudden everything just falls apart. How have you seen that? Do you see that? And how do you manage that when you've got somebody that just thinks, I can talk my way out of anything?
Well, the most obvious in response to that is when you sit in criminal court, you'll see a defendant who's been arrested like 10 times, maybe 15 times. And when you hear about this arrest and the allegations, you hear that they confessed. And you're like, 10 times in a row, they talk to cops and they confess and they make the case for the cop. And so that's the most obvious in the world of criminal law. And I do a lot more state crime than Marc does, more federal crime than I do. But, you see it in federal court too. And it's like, when are you going to learn to stop confessing every time a cop, starts interrogating you, and just keep your mouth shut? Because at some point you got to realize, after 10 times of confessing, that that's the nail in your coffin.
Yeah.
So that's the number one mistake people make, where they just keep talking and they talk their way right into the handcuffs.
Yeah.
But people do make mistakes and talk way too much. But Marc loves to talk about how if, Warren Buffett gets a subpoena for something, he doesn't show up on his own. He brings a team of lawyers with him, right? And he knows you don't talk without your lawyers. So people need to know that. Police get investigated all the time. They know you don't talk without a lawyer. It doesn't mean you're guilty of anything. It means you're smart. Right, you're smart, and you realize that you have a right to counsel in these situations.
Applying it into negotiation, which is what we basically do. If negotiations fail, then we wind up in the courtroom at trial. But applying it in the art of negotiation, talking too much is counterproductive. You want to make your points, you want to make them clear, and brevity is the soul of wit. And the bottom line is, sometimes the less said, the better. You just got to get right to the point.
Yep.
And when you talk too much and you go on and on and on and on, you lose the person.
Yeah. And Marc, you can probably speak to this something, because I'm weird. All I do is think about sales and skillful communication. Something I like to watch a lot of times, and I know it's crazy, but depositions. You'll see depositions go extremely poorly. And then you'll see people that I don't know if they were coached or they're natural about it. Very clear. I'm not saying they're dishonest or anything, but very clear with their answer, very straightforward. If they don't understand the question, they'll say, I don't understand the question. Marc, when you're dealing with a senior level, an executive person, or somebody that's very important, and they're being deposed on something, how do you coach them before in order to skillfully have that art of brevity and have that art of not saying too much, but not seeming evasive, if that makes sense?
Well, the first thing is you've got to convince them, and this is true in anything in life, that don't be afraid that you're not giving enough information. Don't be afraid that if you don't say everything, the person won't understand. Because that's what underlies the reason why people continue to talk and explain and explain. And the more you explain, the more it sounds phony.
Yep.
So the first thing I tell them is, don't worry about it. Just answer the question. If it turns out that there isn't enough said, I'll ask some questions on my turn to bring it out, or we have an opportunity to explain it later on. And this applies in anything in life, whether it's a deposition or a negotiation or a business conversation. The other thing I tell them is, look, the thing you want to do is just answer the question as it is posed. If it's an unfair question, if it's looking to put words in your mouth or deny you the opportunity to explain, I'll object, and I'll make a record, and I'll push that lawyer around to the point that you'll have an opportunity to explain. or we'll just instruct you not to answer and go in front of the judge.
Yeah,
Um,
we run into this, Mark, with people that I coach myself. I've ran into this multi-million-dollar software deals, and you would think, man, there's $12 million on the line. I have to answer every question with this lengthy response. In fact, I think when the stakes are higher, sometimes that brevity is actually more powerful.
I agree.
You know, how does the new software work? It works great. If the CIO has questions about the 64-bit compliance, they'll ask, right? You don't need to give a 1-hour answer to every question that's asked of you.
Right.
in fact, the shorter the answer sometimes shows more confidence.
I could not agree with you more. Let's talk about that, because I want to go into that, because you guys have dealt with unskillful clients, skillful clients. When does someone sound like they're really in control and they're really credible and they're actually kind of controlling the conversation, but in a good way? Like, what do those clients sound like to you? The ones where you're like, this is a dream client. If I could clone them, of course, nobody wants to be in trouble, but this is the type of person that I want to work with. What's in the DNA of that type of person?
It's a good question.
Well, I would,
Yeah.
go ahead, go ahead.
Well, I do think it's a lot of, we can't tell a client or a witness what to say, but we can coach them on how to answer questions. And I do think there's a lot of that comes down to the lawyer preparing them for whether it's trial testimony, a motion hearing testimony, deposition, or a briefing with agents. Because the moment you get put in that hot seat, you could be the most composed, articulate person in the world, but the moment you're in that hot seat and people are firing questions at you, you could just lose all, composure, right?
Yeah, that's something we talk about. I'm a big jujitsu guy and martial arts, but like everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Right.
So you better have a pretty good plan, and you better be coachable, because I don't think anybody could be prepared. And it's not just committing a crime. It literally a job interview, a negotiation, all these things in life where the stakes are high, your adrenaline kicks in and you kind of lose your mind.
Exactly. And I've had clients where I thought they'd be the best, and the moment they're in that seat, they completely collapse, and vice versa. Clients that I thought would be very fragile and collapse under the pressure, get up there and actually do great. So we really do have to, no matter who it is, we have to spend a lot of time preparing them, doing like a mock performance,
Yeah.
of this is how the deposition is going to go. Marc will play prosecutor, I'll play defense, with the client, and really get them prepared for it. I know, Marc, I think you were going to jump in and say something.
Well, I think it starts with, you have to have confidence in yourself, and you have to have confidence in your position. You've got to convince yourself of what you know and feel comfortable in your ability to spew it out. If you go into a meeting, a deposition, trial testimony, negotiation, whatever, and you're unsure of yourself, or you're feeling very insecure, it's going to come out. I don't
Yeah.
care how much you practice, it still comes from what's in you.
I
And
couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more, because I'm a rule follower. So hopefully I'm most definitely
You'd
never
make
going
a
to be a
great
client of you
lawyer
guys.
then.
Right?
Yeah, we're-
But I run into that in my day. I have to be coachable both to myself and everybody. Like, I have to think before, okay, here's how this is going to play out. If it goes bad, here's how I'm going to stay calm. Here's how I'm going to take a breath, right? And I think same thing with athletes, right? There's athletes that are awesome in practice, and when they get out under those lights, they fall apart. And then there's people that are the opposite. They're terrible in practice. Coach is about to cut them, and the next thing you know, they're a star player. It's all in how you prepare for that and shine under that pressure.
Yeah, like my golf game. When it's a casual game, I'm the best player on the course.
When you're not keeping score.
When there's $1 on the line,
Fall
my
apart.
knees are shaking. I
Yeah.
can't hit a 2-foot putt.
Yeah, we run into the same thing in sales coaching. I want to talk about that confidence, and I want to talk about, because my mom was from Boston. She'd smoke the cigarettes. She'd be like, Matthew, life isn't fair. Life is not fair. I want to talk about how fast people judge other people, and in your professional careers, like, where have you seen that, and how fast is it when somebody walks into that courtroom, when you go into that courtroom and your client is there, how fast is everybody judging them? And what takes place in that kind of immediate first reaction?
It's your immediate first reaction is spot on, because there's no question that the jury, let's say it's a jury, they're looking and trying to figure out who is the defendant, right? We'll typically have our client dressed like a lawyer, so they can't quite figure it out. But then as soon as they sit down, they see they're in between the lawyers or so forth.
So you're trying to even delay that judgment as long as you possibly can.
Yes.
Because the longer I go thinking this person's guilty as sin, the harder your job is going to be.
That's correct. And if they're sitting there for 3, 4, 5 days looking at this person and they're charged with whether it's a theft of some type or a violent crime, they're looking at them the whole trial. And so we want to make sure every second of the trial, optics are so important that our client is sitting up, they're taking notes, they're paying attention, they're not slouched over in their chair, playing with their hair or looking around the ceiling tiles and things like that.
And by the way, people do that in their careers too. And
Right.
if I had hair, I'd pull it out. It's like this is a meeting.
Yep.
Be present.
Right.
Have correct posture.
Yep. Don't stare at the jurors. They could feel that you're a creep.
Yeah.
They may take it the wrong way.
Or you're trying to intimidate them.
Correct. Yeah. So those optics, the moment your client walks in the courtroom with you, are very, very important because they are looking to judge your client and even judge us as lawyers. Are they a good lawyer? Are they bad? Are they prepared? Are they not prepared? So it's really important to be cognizant of that. As good litigators, that's something we must be aware of. Like you start off saying, we're not talking about the law today, and you're right. Like there's so much more to our job than the law. Yes, we fight the law and follow any weakness in the government's case. We'll exploit it and push through it like a door, just bust through it. But there's a lot more to being great litigators, and optics is one of them. We have to be realistic that the jury, the judge, the prosecutors, they are looking at our client and judging them for sure.
I'll tell a funny story that kind of proves the point. I was representing a guy once who was allegedly a capo in a crime family, and he looked like he was out of central casting from The Sopranos. He even had the hair like Paulie Walnuts. And we decided we were going to change his appearance. And so we got him a new haircut, sort of blow dry perfectly. We had him wear tweed jackets with the leather patch. We had him wear a square knit tie instead of a silk tie. We bought him phony glasses that were reading type glasses that are half glasses that just
It's less
had clear
intimidating.
and he looked like a college professor. And he walked in the courtroom looking like that. Now, in that case, we had a not guilty verdict. And I am convinced to this day that if we had not changed his appearance, the verdict would have been guilty because the case was that close. But that first appearance that he had, that first impression, was just absolutely critical for our success in the case. Now, having said that, I do want to say that while first impressions are very, very important, they're not necessarily fatal. You
Okay.
can overcome them in certain circumstances. But in a business meeting, if you walk in, if you're slouched, if you're poorly dressed, if you're not groomed, and if your speech is slurred or anything where you just give a bad impression, that usually is a death knell.
I could not agree more, and thank you for saying that, Mark, because I get flack from that all the time, and it's literally the larger the ego of the person is, the less likely they are to look at themselves from the outside and go, wait a minute, yeah, people are judging me. What are some examples, Mark? You've dealt with federal court, you've dealt with the biggest cases ever, large things. What are some of those little subtle things where when you go home or you're in the car on the way home or maybe just quietly to yourself, you're cringing a little bit where you're like, this person is not doing themselves any favor? I know that the case you referenced, we gave the person a new appearance and everything went great. Can you give a few examples of like people getting in their own way where it's like, just please help me help you?
Well, when I'll give you the worst examples when they glare at the witness who's testifying against them, and the jury picks up because, you know, uh, any trial, but especially a lengthy trial, your client is literally not only on trial, they're on display the whole time, as Guy has said, and the jury is constantly looking at them, and a lot of times they're looking at them when a witness says something that may be negative to see their reaction. So glaring at the witness, making making threatening gestures to the witness. I actually had one case where my client went like this.
No.
Yeah, but that wasn't the worst. After the judge admonished him and I got the client on control, after the witness came down off the witness box and passed between the two tables, my client was sitting on the end, stuck his leg out and tripped him.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
So
that was,
we,
but
But you got to say we're human beings, right?
yes.
And then when we're being accused of something, we're going to have, and someone's on the stand bearing us, you have reactions. Even
Yeah.
though we're told, tell them, remain calm, cool, and collected, you're going to see them be sigh or say, oh my God, or, they react. Someone's attacking them verbally from the stand.
Yep.
And it's human nature to be like, oh God, and show a little bit of anger or upset. Sometimes we can use that to our advantage, though. To maybe it comes across like this witness is lying. The body language indicate that.
Yeah.
I've also seen clients where they'll say, I need to go to the bathroom, and then when they come back from the bathroom, this is where we have to always stand by their side. Always, they come back, they say, oh, I bumped into one of the jurors in the bathroom, and I made a stupid comment to them, like, oh God. So
God, yeah,
yeah.
have to report that.
Yep, and then we have to tell the judge. But you talk about how what someone could do to bury themselves. It's things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to something you were saying, because this is something I've experienced hundreds of times in my life, not necessarily in my business career, but like in martial arts. This whole expression of seeing red, it's a real thing. When your adrenaline is pumping and you're feeling threatened, sometimes like I used to have this thing, if I'm biting down really hard on my mouthpiece, like I probably need to just take a rest because bad things are going to happen. Like I'm emotionally invested in and I think the same thing happens, and something maybe you guys can help me with and my followers with is, let's say it's not a trial or whatever, but let's say you're in a boardroom and you're trying to close a deal and there's somebody else on that other side with that other company that's being adversarial to you. What you just told me is some very valuable information for everybody. Don't stare at them. How do you coach people when somebody else is saying bad things about them? Where should they look? Should they look away? How should we do it? Because we all run into that a little bit. Not all of us are in a courtroom, but I run into that in a big boardroom setting. You got one person that's like, we don't need this product or we don't need this service, and they're just saying horrible things about you. What's the best way to respond when you're in a group setting and people are looking to your reaction and somebody else is attacking you?
I'll often say to my client in that situation before we go in the room is, if you start to get uncomfortable like that, turn to me and just say, hey, can we have a moment to speak privately?
That's great
Take them
advice.
out, let them decompress a little bit, catch their breath. I ask them what their concerns were. We talk through it, and then we go back in and kind of restart. And it usually works. That little tip or tool or tactic works.
I think that could help a lot of people in their careers too. Like, because we're not maybe in a criminal level, but we're all accused of things in our careers, and it's like, I didn't do that, the ops team did that, or engineer. Like, instead of losing your temper, step outside and say, hey, can we have a minute, and just kind of decompress before you go back into that negotiation. Because I think a lot of people feel attacked a lot of times. And when it's in a group setting, it's more than just that one-on-one interaction. Everybody is...
They could feel teamed up on.
Correct.
They feel like it's just them. Maybe they're one lawyer. And we have a lot of our meetings, there could be 6 or 7 or 8 people on the other side against just us and our client. So it can feel like they're being ganged up on.
Yeah.
And we also remind them that let us do the talking, that we're here to defend you, we'll advocate for you, and just trust that we're prepared and we'll do a great job for you. So just reassuring them that it's going to be okay. But it's not easy.
If you're just joining us, I've got the 2 best criminal defense attorneys in the country. I've got Guy Fronstin here, Marc Nurik. You guys ask questions for a living. I mean, this is your wheelhouse. What's the difference between asking a question that gets the truth and asking a question that gets somebody just to double down on that lie and keep going? How do you ask skillful questions that get you to the truth?
Marc, you want to take this one first?
Yeah, I think, we're talking about the process of cross-examination, where the person is adversarial to your client's position. Usually it's a process of backing them into an inescapable corner.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes time, and it's very carefully done. And one of the most important things when you ask questions of witnesses is listening to their answers. I taught trial lawyering at Nova for over a span of 20 years. And I always would tell my students, if you prepare all your questions in advance and you constantly look to what your next written question is, you're not listening to the answer. So I
What
think
great
the
advice.
secret,
What great
the,
advice.
the secret to asking good questions is listening to the response and building upon the response. And when someone is lying, inevitably, they wind up tripping over themselves. They wind up saying too much, and they give you that opportunity to slam them. So
Mark,
you
do
got to
you
listen.
think most people realize how much power that person, because I do, but I'm weird and I think about this stuff, how much power that person really has when used appropriately. The person that's asking the questions, if they truly listen to the answer and they're not locked in on what the next question is going to be and they're not thinking about, well, what am I going to say next, how much power they have in being able to just guide that conversation right down the road that they want it to go.
I totally agree. And the amazing thing is, you get responses sometimes that are gifts from the heavens,
Exactly.
and you
Can you
didn't
give us an
expect it.
example of that? I don't want to get you in trouble or anything, but I'm dying to hear an example.
I'm trying to think off the top of my head, but there were times when I would ask a witness about a meeting, and they would say something. A lot of times, getting back to what we had said earlier about talking too much, when they talk too much and they give too much information, and they're lying to begin with, and they're responding. I'll give one quick example. I had a client who was supposedly met with this witness to discuss some kind of criminal deal. And I knew that the client was on that particular day, couldn't have gone to the meeting because his child was born and he was at the hospital.
Okay.
But the witness didn't know that. And so I asked the witness, I kept getting the witness to bury himself more. And he said the meeting was at Starbucks. And how did you know it was at Starbucks? And he said, because I have this receipt and it shows 2 drinks instead of 1. And I normally go every day and I have 1 drink. And what time of day was it? And blah, blah, blah. And I just had him build and build and build it more. And I said, are you aware that that day that you were absolutely certain and repeated everything he said about the meeting and blah, 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 blah. Are you aware that that day he was at the hospital because his daughter was born? And he just froze.
How could
And I
anybody
said,
not know that?
Right. Yep.
and I said, you actually asked these ladies and gentlemen of the jury to believe that rather than be at the birth of his daughter, he was having a cappuccino with you at Starbucks? And that ended it.
Wow.
He had no answer.
Another example that we see in cases a lot is there's rules of evidence, right? And the rules are very strict. So there's some information cannot be admissible into court, right? And sometimes we'll ask a question, and if we're not listening to the answer, we'll miss the fact that in the answer they actually open the door to make something that was not admissible now admissible. Most common, we'll see it like with a prior arrest. We may not be able to admit into evidence that they had a prior arrest, but we'll say, okay, on this day, the officers approached you, right? And you were nervous, weren't you? And they'll say, well, yeah, because the last time it happened, I got arrested. Like, well,
And now that becomes admissible
right.
because
They just open the door to that information. And so if you're not listening to the answer, you could go, and you're reading, like Marc said, like he always took us with his students, he took their paper away from them. If they're just going down a piece of paper, next question.
they're going to miss all that.
Right. So you have to be able to weave your questioning through that. The other thing too, it's a skill set, how to ask a question. And from the first day of law school until the day you graduate, they're training you on how to ask questions. In fact, your listeners may know that the approach for teaching in law school is the Socratic method.
Yeah.
The Socratic method is by asking questions. The professor stands up. It's a 3-hour class. All they do for 3 hours is ask questions. And you as a student, you answer the questions. So all 3 years, you may not realize it, but your brain is getting trained on how to be a methodical question asker, and with the goal of, I want to get to this information. What's the question I have to ask to get there? So that's why I often say, whether you go into practicing law or not, law school is an incredible, discipline for anyone's brain to then go into business or any field really, because it really teaches you how to ask questions and how to listen to the answers. So it's a skill set that we actually, maybe you're born with it. Some people probably are.
I don't know. I mean, because it's nobody's born knowing how to speak Cantonese. You have to go through. I wish they would teach this, and it's something that's very frustrating to me. And I'll give you an example, like real estate professionals. I've got some great ones that come over to me for sales coaching, but most of them think I know everything. I'm great. I hang around them, and they'll be showing a client a piece of property, and they'll say, "Hey, do you want to take a look at XYZ?" And the client will say, "Oh no, that's not important to me," and they'll just gloss over that. And it's like there's something that could be admitted into evidence right there. Just say, what is important to you?
Right.
Why is that? I really want to see the garage. Why? Well, I've had these cars in storage and I never get it. Now all of a sudden you're getting to the heart of the matter, but the success happens in the margins in being able to listen, not necessarily to the direct answer of the question. Do you want to look at the kitchen but the little nuances, that's not important to me, or I'd like to talk about something else. They just gloss it over because they've got their little box questions that they're going to walk people through, and it kills me, because I'm like, you could be helping way more people and make a lot more money if you just learned a method to skillfully ask questions.
Sometimes it can backfire, like in personal relationships with friends. They'll say, "Quit lawyering me, guy." I'm just asking question after question, like, "Quit being a lawyer." Turn it off at times.
That's typically on the golf course, though, when you're trying to talk yourself out of having to pay the money for that whole.
Yeah.
But Matt, you actually hit on something that's so important. What we do as lawyers is really no different. We engage in the art of persuasion. It's the same thing in sales. And the first rule is listen. Don't talk, listen.
Yeah.
Understand what your buyer, what your client wants. Learn from them. Listen. That's why they say, we have one mouth and two ears. Right? Listen. And from that, you develop your questions. And from that, you craft your pitch to what the person wants and needs to hear. And that is the art of persuasion. It's not just sitting there talking all the time.
Yeah, something that we do at Easton University that I try and impart on the people that work with me is you should never, and I'm hearing a lot of similarities with law here. I always say you should never be talking about your product, your solution, your service, unless you can say, "Mark, because of the fact that you told me blank, I'd like to recommend XYZ or 1, 2, 3, or because of the fact that you said it." It requires them, if you fix that in your head, that I'm not going to make any recommendations to you unless I can say because of the fact that you said, or because of the fact that you. And it's a lot like. And again, I've seen some lawyers on TV, guys. You can laugh me out of the room, but it seems to be a lot like law. Like that's like building a case. Right. If I just go and say my client's innocent, even when my client is innocent, an innocent person is going to pay the price for that. We have to slow down. We have to listen. We have to build that case, and then in those closing arguments, hey, because of the fact that you saw this, you heard this, there was some misinformation here. This is why my client is innocent. Am I in the zip code of law?
You're right. And people like to know they've been heard.
Yes.
And that makes them feel, more comfortable with you and appreciative of you. And that's part of going back to the conversation about building trust with them. They'll then feel more comfortable and to opening up to you when they know you actually are listening and hearing them and understanding where they're coming from. It's really important.
Marc, you deal with, is the right word's white collar crime, right? And Marc, you can do anything, but you deal with a lot of really high level white collar crime, meaning it's not necessarily I took a gun to a liquor store or something. It's
business crime.
Business crime, right? How do you deal with the egos of these people, and how do you bring them to reality to where you can help them help themselves, Marc? Because that's something that all of us have to deal with in our career, that the higher up the food chain you go, usually the higher the ego is. And some of those people are the most difficult people to work with. How do you work with people in that. And I'm not saying all your clients are like that, but you've probably
No,
ran
but
into
you're
one or
right.
two.
There is a controllability factor, and I find that actually the worst or the highest problem when you're dealing with politicians.
Okay, now we're
They,
talking about something. Why is
yeah,
that, Mark?
because they're used to convincing a lot of people. Obviously, they got elected, which means they convinced a
Yep.
lot of people, and they're used to being in control. And they're in denial even when they're accused of improprieties, and they've all got explanations, and they think they're smarter than you. And certainly because they've had more power than you, um, they want to take control of the situation. And the first thing I do is I say, look, if you're going to be the lawyer here, you don't need me.
Yeah, I'm out.
You hired me. You're wasting your money if you're not going to listen to me. And if you're not going to listen to me, I'm wasting my time. So we have to kind of have an understanding here. If you don't agree with what I say, let's talk it through. But if you want to run the show, I'm gone. And immediately you say that, they start to understand. The smart ones do. There are some people who are beyond control.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of our
And
clients have never been in trouble before. Probably 99% of our clients are first-time offenders, and most of our clients are very wealthy, successful people in business. Maybe other parts of their life maybe have some issues going on, but in business and finance, they're usually very successful. So they think that they're the smartest person in the room. And they think that even if whether they're meeting with their estate planning attorney, their corporate, negotiating deals, they feel like they're the smartest one in the room, and that carries over into their meeting with their criminal defense lawyer, right? So their whole life they've been the number one honcho in there. So
Yep.
it does take some time for them to realize that, like Mark just said, you hired me because I'm the best. This is not your bailiwick. It's not your lane. You've got to trust me. If you can't trust me and follow my advice, you're paying me a lot of money for my advice. You're a smart man. You should be following it. 99% of the time, they do come around and realize, you know what, you're 100% right. Tell me what to do and I'll do it. But every once in a while, you get that person who you can't get them off of that pedestal that they're on.
Yep.
And that's going to obviously hurt them. But we'll say, no, we're not the right lawyer for you then, because I won't represent someone if they're not following our advice, because then we can't do our job.
I want to go back to something that was said. We've got Guy Fronstin, Marc Nurik. They're the best criminal defense attorneys out there. Our time is limited. Mark, you touched a nerve with me, and you can tell me if I'm crazy or not. And bad pun, in their defense, I do want to. Mark had mentioned politicians and how difficult it is to work with them. I think a lot of time, if we're working with our CEO in our company or our board, maybe not to that level, but the same thing. Mark, in their defense, though, do you think what's hurting them in that situation is they have people around them? If I'm a political figure, probably insulated by people that are always like, oh, yeah, you're right, Matt. You're smart, Matt. This is genius, Matt. And it's like, if I'm doing something that is inappropriate, it's almost like it makes it even more difficult because nobody has the guts to stand up to a politician or a CEO a lot of times until matters get worse. Do you see that at all, Mark, or am I crazy?
yes, and there are some very glaring recent examples of that with respect to the last administration, where there was some question as to whether or not Biden should have resigned sooner, but the people around him just kept. He was feeding off of the people
Yeah.
around him. That's the allegation. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm
But
not
that's how
part of
space
that.
shuttles blow up, right? Is
Right.
it's like everybody is like, this is the plan. We got to toe the line. It's all good. We got to launch. It's a first teacher in space. And it's like not one person has the guts to go, wait a minute, those O-rings were sitting out there for a week in freezing temperatures.
Right.
It's
Well,
so difficult to deal with that.
there is, in my judgment, a way of trying to deal with it. There's no guarantee you'll be successful, but my rule is those people don't come into my office when I'm sitting with my client. I
Yeah.
can't control what they do with him or her outside the office, but I can control what happens in the room. And it's just one-on-one with me. So I have a chance of working with my client, and sometimes trying to overcome what has been the roadblock that has been created by this misinformation or these sycophants or these people who are just yes men or yes women. And that's the only way I can deal with it. But it is a problem. And the higher they are up on the food chain, the more they're surrounded, then the larger the number of people that are surrounding them.
Yeah, and what a great lesson for all of us, whether it's a family situation or a business situation. Marc just hit on something. When you can, try and pull that person away from the group. Be respectful, be polite, but I think that you're going, as Marc sees, Guy, as you see a lot. That's, I think, where the honesty comes out a lot of times, is in those one-on-one interactions where you don't have all of these people. You don't have the ego of, if I say something, I'm going to look bad to the group. I see parents do that all the time. I'll go out to dinner and I see parents having an argument right in front of the kids, and I want to walk over there and be like, hey, guys, I'm not an attorney, but you're not going to reach any skillful conclusions here, because you're both, would the word be pandering to the jury? You're both just trying to look good in front of the kids and plead your case. You need to step outside and have a human-to-human conversation.
Right. I agree. Yep. And kids are very impressionable. Yeah.
What are some things, guys, and again, I'm with Guy Fronstin, Marc Nurik, best criminal defense attorneys in the world. What are some things that you guys see that in the moment the person feels like they're in control, but that behavior, that type of action, that type of attitude, that type of bravado is actually weakening their position? Where do you see that? Or do you see that where it's like this super confident person,
Right.
They're not doing themselves any favors?
Well, I don't know if this is exactly on point, but you were just talking about the politicians. When I've represented some politicians, their bravado is everyone's going to take care of me. They believe, I'm so powerful. This will just be dropped. It'll disappear. You make a call, they'll hear it's me. And they're that confident in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you call, a lot of times people say, public corruption is such an issue. They're like, actually, we're going to go harder against that person, because all eyes are on this case. And if we just brush it under the carpet, there's going to be real problems in the public corruption arena. So therefore, you have to. They don't understand that. Hey, they think they're in control when they're really not.
We see that a lot on the criminal side. If your algorithm is serving it to you, those body cams of people getting pulled over, and I'm sure these people are decent people. They're not horrible people, but boy, do they look terrible when an officer pulls somebody over and they're immediately disrespectful and I know the chief of police. I think there's politicians that have been pulled over.
Absolutely.
And they're like, do you know who I am? And it's like, how can you not see that you are making your situation horrible?
What's the biggest case at the moment in this country? Tiger Woods. Who was he on the phone with when he got pulled over when he flipped his car?
Was it the president?
President of the United States.
Wow.
He was on the phone. He gets out of the car. He says, "Oh, I was just talking to President Trump," right?
That's probably not doing? Is that now from your as a lawyer, probably not doing himself some favor? I mean, maybe he's got a sphere of influence, but that being on camera, that can't look good, right?
Well, if you have a really good lawyer like me and Marc, we will find a way to present it in a positive light.
Perfect.
Right?
And maybe he can help you with your golf game too.
Yeah. But you think about it. We say maybe President Trump's going to come forward and say, I spoke to him. He sounded coherent. He wasn't slurring his speech.
Yeah.
He wasn't asking me to get him out of any trouble or anything. We had a normal conversation.
Yeah, I would think that'd be very helpful for him.
The President of the United States saying that under oath would be very helpful.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a chance he's going to be in that courtroom, but in any event. But you're right. I think, generally speaking, attitude doesn't work for you, when you are encountering police. Everybody knows that. Of course, people come from different perspectives. Some people feel they've been profiled. Some people feel that the police officer has acted out of control. We've seen numerous examples of that. So it's a case-by-case situation. But
it comes down, you talk about either salesmanship or just communication. Cops are human, and if they're interrogating, investigating, they're targeting someone, and you communicate well with them, it's going to go better than if you communicate in an adversarial, litigious, aggressive way.
Yeah.
Right? So it does come down to communication.
You know,
not
you're dealing with a
defensive.
human being,
Right.
and even if they come at you with a really bad attitude, your job, if you're smart, is to try to lower the temperature
Yeah.
and find a way of communicating. It's like anything else. Any encounter between two human beings involves the attempt to communicate optimally.
You know,
If
Yeah.
you
and Matt, you talk
succeed at
about
that,
martial arts that
yeah.
are pretty proficient at. I'm representing a grandmaster right now in a allegation of a sexual battery on one of his students, a female student who was underage, and he talked to me a lot about verbal judo or verbal de-escalating.
Mm-hmm.
That he's trained on that, like how to say, instead of saying you shouldn't do that, he'll say we take this position.
Yeah.
He'll group it in a whole. So there's a whole verbal communication aspect to diffuse or lower the temperature, so to speak, and
Yeah.
the emotion of something. And that was a big part of his training as a grandmaster. That he's
Yeah, that's one thing I like about martial arts is people are generally, it's crazy, but they're very polite, they're very respectful, just because it's built into that. That's something, my favorite compliment ever. People are like, Matt, I love your videos. My favorite compliment is when people are like, I met your son or I met your daughter. They're so polite, they're so respectful. You and I are members to the same club. Anywhere I go in that club, people are like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for showing, are pleasant because we're pleasant people. And if things become unpleasant, at least my family, if I'm around, we don't freak out. We don't lose our temper. It's yes sir, no sir. And what's the worst that's going to happen? You don't get dinner. There's no point in getting worked up. I don't know if there is anything about getting worked up to that point. It's better to just step away. And if it is something serious where you need an attorney, right, be brief, be respectful, and then meet with a professional and work through the problem versus blowing up at somebody in the moment. It seems like you can't get on an airplane anymore or order a cup of coffee without one person completely exploding.
right.
And a lot of times I think they ruin their lives over it.
Yep. I had that, believe it or not, on a cruise. It was the first hour on a cruise ship. Everyone's going off to the Virgin Islands. You'd think they'd be in the greatest mood ever. And this guy was irate because the elevator was too crowded. Someone held the door too long, whatever. And he wound up getting arrested, because he went off.
Not only ruined his day, ruined his cruise, ruined
Right.
everything.
Yeah.
And now he's probably going to have that. I don't know how that works, but he's probably going to have that on his record for
Yes, he is.
forever because a freaking elevator was too
Right.
crowded.
Yep.
Like
Yeah.
we have to learn to control ourselves, and sometimes you have to learn to seek counsel, seek help of other people, but don't make their job more difficult by freaking out in that moment. Anything you want to add to that, Mark, in terms of just keeping your composure in those heated moments?
No, I think that well advised, and you do that with confidence and you do that with strength. You can be strong and silent.
Uh,
You
uh,
can be strong and
yes.
restrained.
And I think a lot of times you're stronger because you're silent. It's that person that's yelling. It's that person that's raising their voice. It's their person that's, I'm never going to tolerate this. At least for me, it seems like they're acting out of a position of weakness, right?
I agree.
A strong person has faith that the truth will come out, or they'll get a table at another restaurant. Right, and there's just no point. I don't think there's really a point in yelling at somebody over anything. Be more skillful. Last question I want to ask both of you. I got Guy Fronstin, Marc Nurik, best criminal defense attorneys. Both of you have seen it all. I think Netflix should give you guys a show and talk about all the great. And I mean, it's great television, but not so great for that individual. Sure. Rapid fire. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see people make that end up, ruining an important conversation? In this case, ruining an important trial. What are some of those mistakes that you guys see happen over and over and over and over again? Now, I know you wouldn't want to fix this in the world because you guys make
a living off of it.
You make a living off of it, but don't worry, we'll edit this out. Nobody will watch the episode. People will continue to screw up, and you'll get a ton of clients. But what are some of those mistakes that people make where it's just like, can you get your foot out of your mouth?
Yeah.
Well, it's going too far. It's trying to make up stuff. The world is filled with people who inflate their resumes, they get caught at it, people who tell a little too much of the truth and they embellish it.
Yep.
And when you have a client who just doesn't stop and makes up a lot of crap, um, and then it begins to sound phony, and then they get tripped up in questioning because they don't remember. There's an old saying by Mark Twain: if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything.
What a great saying.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Yeah, it is.
And I've had long time ago, because I'm married to the best person in the world, and I'm legally required to say that. But she really is. But I've had previous relationships where it's like, it's a sickness almost, and that's one of the things that we won't tolerate with our children is lying. Like that's where you're going to really get in trouble if you lie, because it's this, to Mark's point, and he sees that it's the highest level, federal court, right? It avails nothing. It just snowballs, and then you have to tell 4 more lies to cover up the 1 lie, and then you got to tell 16 lies to cover up the 4, and it becomes this compounding effect.
Right, and often the problem that brought the person to our office, we can get them out of, but if they do something to cover it up, that becomes more difficult. It's a compounding effect. And we see that a lot with people where they think, oh, they made a mistake and they're going to try to cover it up. Something that had some illegal technology, downloaded some illegal things. And what they did, they got caught. And in between having to surrender their technology, they wiped everything
hard
clean.
drives.
Yeah. They cleaned everything. They scrubbed it all. And that just made the problem a million times worse for them.
I think people do that in their normal lives too. People do that in their careers. And it's like one of the words that I try and teach people to use is embarrassed. And it's like that. Some of the biggest problems happen from a small problem and you trying to cover it up.
Right.
Better to just go into the office and tell your boss, hey, I'm really embarrassed about this. I screwed up.
Correct.
Right?
Agree.
Because people, if you use the word, and I'm not an attorney, but at least what I've seen in the business world, a lot of times, if you say it's not my fault or, this is why I did this, they're going to take you to task. But if you just say, I screwed up. I'm really, really embarrassed. Yeah. Let's work through this. It doesn't snow. A lot of people, back when I worked for Fortune 500 companies, and I'm just thinking about this as you said it, Guy, most of the people that I know that were let go for inappropriate behavior, it was not the initial thing that happened. It was all the other stuff that they did after the fact that got them in trouble, right?
We can work through the initial behavior that got you in trouble. But if you repeat that behavior, it's much harder. A famous case from maybe 15, 20 years ago was Martha Stewart. Maybe I'm aging myself, but
I remember that.
She could have worked her way very successfully through her, what she was under investigation for, but then she lied during the investigation, and that's what she wound up getting prosecuted for and going to jail for.
And that's a very important point that you make, Guy, because there are loads of examples of people in the political sphere in both administrations, cabinet people, people who were advisors to the president, other people who were in the political arena, who ultimately got prosecuted for 18 United States Code 1001, which is lying to a federal agent during the course of an investigation that would have gone nowhere otherwise.
Yeah. And we must have it. There must be an 1801 or whatever in our careers too. And it's like lying to your boss, right? Lying to your spouse. Correct. Yeah. Like it's probably better. First of all, just don't be a blockhead and don't do bad stuff. But when you genuinely make a mistake, just own up to it.
Own up to it. Take responsibility.
Or don't say anything.
Or correct. Right. That's a great line, Mark. Or don't say anything at all. But I don't think you guys can tell me if I'm wrong. I don't think you've had any clients where you're like, wow, super good liar. They should just keep on lying. Right. And it's a great habit to have in your life. Lying is not a good thing for anybody.
Oh, I love when investigators are lying in a case, and they will sometimes all team up together and be in cahoots because we're going to find the holes in their
It's going to come out.
100%.
Right.
And I'm glad you guys exist because there are innocent people that are caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. And it's like, if there's not somebody skillful like you that knows how to question in a skillful manner, the Socratic method, right? That knows how to go, well, when you say this, can you give me a specific example? Or what were you guys drinking at the Starbucks and all that great stuff? It's like, that's the kind of stuff that people's lives are on the line. And because you're so good with your questions, that's got to make you feel pretty cool when you're like, man, this could have gone the wrong way for the right person. And it's great that we have, people like you out there defending the good people. It's sad that you guys have to sometimes defend blockheads too, but
True.
hey, it's everybody's entitled to a fair defense, whether they take the advice of their skillful attorneys or not. Guy Fronstin, Marc Nurik, thank you guys for being on the podcast. It's an honor. It's a privilege. Please do not send me a bill.
No, but you have to watch our podcast too.
Please tell everybody in my circle how to find you guys, how they can watch you guys. They're probably like I believe the correct word is champing at the bit, not chomping at the bit.
Right.
But they're probably champing at the bit
right.
to watch some more of your podcast. I believe it's called You're Free to Go.
That's right.
Huge fan of it.
I don't telling our stories about our cases.
Yeah.
Or, as we call them, crazy ass cases.
Right.
That you just wouldn't believe happened, but they happened. And Guy, why don't you just tell them a little more about it?
Anyone who's a true crime fan, true crime junkie,
my mother would
good.
love this.
We have to get her on it.
Say shout out to Gina.
Right. And tell her if she wants to submit some questions, we'll have her on the show.
She would love that.
But what's unique about You're Free to Go is that Marc and I talk about our cases. Like you can watch a Dateline episode or other true crime podcasts, and it's usually a journalist talking about someone else's case, and they could talk for 20 hours on one particular case. It could be a celebrity like Will Ferrell on someone else's case. Marc and I are talking about our cases, behind the scenes, what went on, why we did what we did, why the judge did what they did, what our client was thinking, how we had crazy jurors on it, and it's really a look behind the curtain on the. And we changed the names because of confidentiality, of course.
So you get all that. That allows you to give them all the good.
Right.
To spill all. You get all the good dirt.
Yeah, the good dirt, and we sprinkle in some education. We'll say, how jury selection really works. So it's a 45 to 50-minute episode, and we spend about 20 minutes on one case, 20 minutes on the other case, and some banter back and forth. Marc and I are pretty good at that. In fact, you mentioned he's in LA. He's flying in tonight, and we'll be in this studio tomorrow recording one of our next episodes.
I love it. It's called You're Free to Go?
That's it. And it's on everything, Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Yeah.
You're free to go, guys. Watch it on YouTube. Listen to it on Spotify. Watch it on Spotify. Check it out on. If you have received any benefit to these wonderful individuals that are not going to bill me for their hour because I would have to give blood, mortgage my house, and sell all my cars, Guy Fronstin, Marc Nurik, the best criminal defense attorneys on planet Earth. Check out their podcast. You're Free to Go. Once you've written it down, you're free to go. Then you can be free to go. Thank you for being on all the answers, gentlemen. It was very, very fun, and I think we've helped the world in more than one way by giving your wisdom out here for free, because none of us can afford you until we have to, and then we find the money. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you, Matt. It's been a pleasure.
Really nice. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.